So in this lesson, I'm going to show you how to use DigitalOcean to deploy a Node.js application. So in our previous lesson, we used Heroku to actually upload our files to a remote server, and it also ran the npm install commands for us to make sure all of the dependencies were installed for our project. But you can actually create your own server and push your Node.js projects to it in order to host it yourself. So you can use DigitalOcean to create one of these servers. And with that, you get the increased flexibility of being able to install whatever software, tools, or services that you want to use for your projects. Of course, with that flexibility comes complexity, but I'll show you in this tutorial that it's quite simple to set up a DigitalOcean server, or droplet as they like to call them, and host a Node.js application. So first things first, you'll need to create an account with DigitalOcean, and it is a paid-for platform. There is no free tier, as there is with Heroku and other platforms, but I'll provide a link below in the description which will give you some credit if you do want to go ahead and set up a DigitalOcean droplet. So once you've created your account and logged in, we need to create one of these servers, a droplet, and you can simply do that by clicking the Create button in the top right hand corner and then choosing Droplets. And we'll just run through some of the settings. We'll keep most of them as their default. So we're going to install the Ubuntu operating system. And for our purposes, the $5 a month server is powerful enough to host some simple Node.js applications. Next, choose a data center that's close to your location. And then you're going to need a way to log on to the new droplet, which can either be via an SSH key or via a password. And it's obviously recommended to go for an SSH key. And if you're not sure what an SSH key is or how to create one, I'll provide a link below on how to do that from our Command Line Essentials course that guides you through the process of setting one up. Once all that's done, just click Create Droplet at the bottom of the page. And that'll take you to a page that will actually set up the droplet for you, and it can take a few moments for that to complete, so just let the progress bar get to the end and then you'll have your droplet ready to use. So once the droplet's set up, you do have an IP address in which to access it, and if we just try to browse that now, you'll see we get no response, and that's because there's no software that's been configured on our droplet to actually serve web pages at the moment. So that's our next step, to log on to the droplet and to actually install the relevant software, and then finally put our Node.js application onto it. So in our command prompt, I'm just going to make an SSH connection to our new droplet. And generally when the droplets are set up, you'll just have one user of root set up ready to log in at the IP address. And once you're logged in, you might want to create additional users to provide a more secure working environment, but let's just focus on getting our Node.js application set up on this droplet for the moment. So if you remember right back to the start of our Node.js Essentials course, we installed a package called nvm which allowed us to install different versions of Node.js. So Node won't be installed on our Linux distribution as default, so we can install it via the Ubuntu repository, but I'm going to install nvm just so that we've got the same environment on our local computer as we do on our remote server. So going to the nvm GitHub page, I'm just going to grab the command that will install nvm for us, and pasting that into our SSH session sets up nvm on our droplet. Oh, and we just need to make sure nvm is available on our session by reloading our bash preferences. And you can see the latest version is 12.6.0, so let's install that version on our droplet. So now you can see we've got Node installed, and also npm. So with Node installed, we actually need to get our application code onto our droplet. And I've actually uploaded the standard Express template that we used for our Heroku project yesterday. So with that available, I can actually clone that onto our remote droplet. And let's navigate into the folder to install the dependencies. So in order to get our application running, we could do what we were doing locally and just say npm start, or possibly even install nodemon, which will restart the app if it encounters any errors. But there are a couple of other alternatives that you can use to manage your Node.js applications when they're in a production environment, and probably the most popular is one called PM2, the PM being short for process management. So what PM2 will do is manage the application as a whole, and deal with any problems that are happening in terms of memory or errors that occur within the application. And it will also make it easy to restart should the actual droplet, the server that we're working with, have to shut down and restart. So if we examine our package.json file, when we were running npm start within our local projects, really what it was doing is running a file in the bin folder called www. So we're going to use pm2 to run that file for our Node.js application. So this will set pm2 up and use it to run our project. And we can tell our app is running online by simply browsing to the IP with the port of 3000, which is the default IP Express uses to host its application. Of course, not many users are going to know that they're going to need to add the port number onto your website address in order to load your application. So the last thing we're going to do is install Nginx to actually serve requests to your main droplet on port 80 and then forward them on to your Express.js application. So first of all, let's install Nginx. And simply by doing that, if we go back to our browser and browse to our droplet's IP address, you can see we're getting the Nginx welcome page, but of course we want our Express.js application to be appearing now, so we need to put a bit of config into Nginx to tell it to forward requests to our Express.js application. So we can find that configuration in a folder called etc nginx sites available default, and I'll use the nano text editor to make the changes. And you can see there are a lot of comments in this particular file, but I'm just going to replace this one section called location with some predefined rules which will proxy all of our requests to our local host application running on port 3000. So if we save that file, and back in our session, we'll just test our Nginx config. So our syntax seems to be okay, so we can actually just restart Nginx. And once that's done, if we head back over to the browser, this time when we refresh the page, instead of getting the Nginx placeholder page, we're actually being forwarded on to our Express.js application. So as you can see, there's a lot more work getting your Node.js application up and running with DigitalOcean, and it'd be very similar with any other cloud hosting provider that you might use. But hopefully you've seen that once you know a few of the commands and the process for getting your application set up, that it's not too difficult to get up and running. So if you have a custom domain that you want to point your droplet to, you would need to go to your domain name provider and get them to point your domain's DNS to the IP address of your particular droplet. And whereas with Heroku, you would just push any changes that you're making to your app to the Heroku repository and it would rebuild the entire project, with our DigitalOcean setup, you'd need to push the changes to GitHub and then create a remote SSH connection to your droplet and pull in the new changes to your Git repository running on your droplet. Of course, as mentioned before, there are lots of fancy tools and tricks that you can use to create a more fluid and continuous delivery of your projects, but hopefully this has given you enough to get started deploying your applications to DigitalOcean.